In the book, yeah, I like the way that you've tied. I've just read a section of it, but I
Hmm.
like the way that you've. I like the way it starts essentially because elements of it is your mindset of where you was at a certain point in America, yeah, which we will discuss.
Hmm.
But then you almost then go into your dad,
Hmm.
elements of your dad in that, yeah. And your dad was like a racial justice commentator,
Hmm.
an activist, and a writer,
Yeah,
yeah,
broadcaster. Yeah,
yeah, broadcaster.
yeah.
He was definitely like, doing his bit for the community, yeah. Did he have any? What was his opinion on you pursuing music? Like, did he have any preconceptions of the music business, so to speak, as somebody who is an activist speaking for people? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's funny you just ask the question because my dad for a long time, and it wasn't probably until Amy Winehouse started to blow up, and not even on the second album, on the first album. But but Dad didn't really understand what I did or what my skill set was in the music industry, right? Because to him, if I was in the music industry, but you're not musical, you're not a musician, you don't play anything.
Yeah.
So he was like, so what's your skill? Because we're growing up, you never showed me that this music was a thing. But again, when dads think they're present and they're not present. But to know that, but my mum and dad had the most amazing record collection, and but that aside, it wasn't until Amy kind of people started to talk about Amy, and he was like, and I hadn't had any real huge success. It was kind of Amy, the Sugar Babes, and Tyre all started to happen at the same time. But so up until that point, he was just like, "What's an A&R man? What do you mean? But what do you mean you find talent and you're in the studio with them? You don't know about this. What do you know about the studios?"
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So he was confused that anybody would be listening to me and that I would have any value or any input into anybody making music whatsoever. Um, you know, my dad loved his music. They had the best record collection. So yeah, my dad wasn't convinced for a while what it even was. So yeah, that was interesting.
Do you remember? Because I feel like a lot of us. This happens in different parts of in different contexts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like for anyone who's got a parent and a parent is in a part of your life or whatnot, yeah, there becomes a point where maybe when you're young, your mum or your dad, whoever, seems like indirectly a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
They're immortal. They're going to be around forever. All of that type of stuff. And then you get to a point when you realize, oh wait, hold on a minute. My parent was younger than me at one point. They
Mm-hmm.
were younger
Mm-hmm.
than me, and they had a different type of life or whatnot. Yeah. With all of what your dad was actually doing, do you remember the moment when you realized, oh no, my dad is actually serious about something that is happening in the world? Do you remember that part?
Um, yeah, I mean, listen, the one thing that I was aware, and it was because of dad, and it was because of mum, and it was because they were Black Panthers and they were civil activists. I was aware of race at a very early age, um, and not just the incoming of 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 hate that we had incoming when we were growing up in the 70s from white people, but just politically what it was to be black, and the hill that you had to stand on from such a young age that you couldn't let people take the piss.
Mm.
Um, so I Dad was always central to that because I was always on demonstrations and he was always speaking and he was always talking. But there was probably two instances. One when there was a famous poet, reggae poet called Linton Kwesi Johnson. That when my dad got jailed, Linton wrote a protest record for him, and it was called "Man Free for Dark as Hell, and then the second time, and that was around when I was 7 or 8. So these were the kind of records that I was listening to, and then the next time was when my dad had a TV program on Channel 4 called The Devil's Advocate, and it was just he became such a cult figure, and I just remember whenever I was with him, he was walking down the street, or I went to meet him in the West End, you know, for a Chinese, and they would say, "Don't worry about the bill, Mr. Howell." The Devil's Advocate, and people were like, "What? Darkus? Is that guy Darkus on TV? Why have you got the same name? What, is your dad? How come you haven't got the same surname?" So you have to kind of explain, you know. So even though I had the same surname, people didn't make the same first name. People never made the connection until it was like, till my dad became really famous and cult personality on Devil's Advocate, and people were like, "What? That's your dad?" Darkus. Right. So yeah, that was the time when I was like, "Oh, he's kind of crossed over into the bit of the mainstream." Yeah, it's, you know, it was always difficult because we had the name, and I've wished that upon my son, who's called Darkus as well. But you don't realise until you get a bit older that you can't really fuck about with the name. And probably for a while I was fucking around with the name.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you don't want the younger Darkus. I used to be called Little Darkus, and you just didn't want that one mashing up the name Darkus. So that's what I tell my son now.
Right.
So I'll say, I'll change your name.
Understand the legacy.
Yeah.
Understand the legacy.
Which is a bit of pressure on him.
It is.
You know, because it turned out to, which again, I didn't realise until much later, till writing the book and stuff, that played a part in terms of what I stood for, what I would take a pasted for, because I knew I was going to lose the fight. But because of the way I was brought up, I wasn't going to do the runner. I was going to stay in the fight. So whether that was physically or verbally.
What do you mean by lose the fight, and what you're talking about in what context?
You know, if you were growing up in the 70s and someone came for you, and it was, you know, throwing racial insults or coming for you physically, sometimes you had to be on your toes and run because you didn't want to die. But other times you just spoke like, "We're going to have this tear up. I know I'm going to get beaten up, but I can't." You know, so, you know, and yeah, I had to be careful that I didn't take some of that attitude into the workspace. But, but yeah, it was you kind of, I probably, and I still have I have a sense of injustice. You know what I mean? So if I think you're talking down to me, or you're talking down in a situation, you know, I'll pipe up. And sometimes, you got to know when to hold your tongue. Did
you carry some of that in the because even early on in the book, where you're sort of mentioning about, like, you want to sign an act, your boss is not letting you sign an act, and you're going crazy. You're talking a bit about that, and which in the end you're like, I can't even be here. But did you see like some of that, the anger, and also, you know, the things that you grew up seeing and knowing, did that play a part in how you was at times in an office?
Yeah, especially initially, because again, you grow up, you know, you think, you know, even if you're in the room because you're good at what you do, you still feel a sense of, "Oh, mate, they're tolerating me. I know, you know, and they're the ones that let you in the room. So you're being let in the room, and you hope it's because you're good."
Yeah. Oh, do you feel like an element in your mind? There's a part of you that's thinking, "Rah, are they trying to deal with me on some token type thing?"
Yeah, because everybody likes the optics. Everybody likes the optics, and you know, when I was coming up, it was, you know, the late 80s, and there wasn't a lot of young black people coming up in the industry. So, you know, and yeah, you know, if you know, so I you know, and I figured out, you know, what do they call it? Code switching.
Yeah, code switching.
You know, and I figured that out really early. So you know, no, I figured it. I figured it out too late. Two scenarios. I figured it out too late. One, because I was in a situation where I was just an assistant in promotions, and someone told me to get something, like I was an idiot, and I was like, "Who are you talking to?" It's a much older person than me. I'm a young kid, and I was like, "Who are you talking to?" And the guy was looking at me, going, "What do you mean? Who am I talking to?" And I went to pick up the chair.
Oh, swear.
Yeah, I went to pick up the chair like you would do if you were just being dumb
Outside, yeah.
And I just remember just going and looking at the guy's face, and he was like a look of horror, like, is he going to pick up this chair and dash it? So I caught myself and I put the chair down. And the second time was when I walked myself out of Ireland because they wouldn't let me sign this artist. Where I was just like, well, if you don't want to sign this, if you won't let me sign this artist, I might as well leave. And they was like, well, there's the door. And I stupidly showed myself out the door. So, yeah, there's a couple of those two instances kind of was a bit of the turning point for me, that when I got the chance to get back to Ireland, because I left Ireland and I came back a couple of years later. But from that point, I said, never again. Never again. Apart from if I'm not good at my job and I don't deliver, I will get fired. But never again am I going to get fired and I'm going to walk myself out the door because I'm impatient, I'm angry, I'm frustrated.